This is Wrestling with Wrestling's Past and Present. I'm Tim Kurt.
I'm Roland Bulis.
And we have made it to episode 38. Today's topic is SummerSlam 2002. It went down just about 18 years ago.
Yeah, it was August 25th, I believe, was the show of 2002 rather. So yeah, it's been a while. But a lot of the names, ironically enough, that were on the show are still somewhat relevant now. So, well, not a lot, but a good amount would probably be the best way to describe it. A good amount of people are still at least relevant now in business. So that's saying a lot, I think.
Yeah, as we run down the card, you're going to notice there's a lot of star power on this show. I mean, a lot of marquee matchups that be main event anywhere, in the world. This is kind of an underrated show. I don't know if you think of this one as when you think of SummerSlam, but when you look at the card is stacked here.
Well, a lot of people think of SummerSlam 05 because that's when Shawn and Hulk fought.
Yep.
So I think that's one of the ones in the early 2000s that people focus on. But like you said, from what I saw, I saw it when it happened, and we rewatch it like we normally do, and I didn't see really a bad match on the card. So
no,
I think this was definitely an underrated show. Not to give away my opinion on it all the way, but it definitely was good to go back and watch it. And there was no lulls in the action, and any of the transitions they had, there was really no let me up matches, I guess would be the best way to describe it.
Yeah, no, not a whole lot of filler on this show. So there's 9 total matches. You had one match on Heat, and that was Spike Dudley going to get a win over Steven Richards in about 2.5 minutes, which is kind of a long match for Heat, as we kind of talked about in the past here.
Yeah, usually if you get over that 2-minute mark, you're a stud.
I know. Obviously, we didn't go back and watch this one, but it is probably your typical Heat match. I think Spike and Steven, probably a little bit underrated in what they can do in the ring. So I'm imagining this one was, fairly decent.
Yeah, I think, like you said, they're both good hands. Probably somewhat due to their size, they kind of get overlooked a little bit because, they're not really big guys.
Mm-hmm.
But, Steven Richards was pretty jacked up for a little guy. He had good muscle tone to him, and I'm sure Vince liked that. We know Vince likes his muscle guys, but, yeah, if he was a couple, maybe 6 inches taller and, 50 more pounds, maybe people would care more.
Yeah.
But, yeah, just 2 smaller guys that both go. And, Spike Dudley, for some of the stuff he did in ECW and in WWE, more or less crash test dummy stuff. So some of the stuff he did and survived it is a miracle in itself. So
absolutely. We kick off the SummerSlam 2002 show with a hell of a match, I think. You have Kurt Angle going to get a win over Rey Mysterio by submission in just over 9 minutes here. What a way to open the show with Kurt Angle and Rey Mysterio. There's a lot of matches on this card I think could have opened it, but, so it's kind of hard to choose the order, I think, when you have this stacked of a card. But I think you can't go wrong with Angle and Mysterio here. I think they put on a great match, a great opener. Crowd was totally, giving Angle the business throughout the whole thing. They're in New York, so New York's kind of a hot crowd here. So I thought it was a perfect way to open the show.
Yeah, I don't know. Some of the shows we've seen have been a little bit uneventful for their first match, or it's kind of been hit or miss. It's either been a really good first match or the shits for our first match, to say the least. This match was not anything short of an amazing match, even no matter where it was on the card. But it started off the show hot, and it kept the show going. I think it set the tone for the show really well because, like you said, it was about a 10-minute match, and it was nonstop 10 minutes too. It wasn't no lulls. In the Shawn Michaels Triple H match and the Brock match again, you have some spots where it kind of slows down. This match never slowed down.
Yeah.
This match was going the whole way for 10 minutes. Towards the end, you had the Rey Mysterio going for the West Coast pop. He ended up getting Angle kicked out of it. And like you said, he ended up there was one sloppy spot at the end there where he tried for the Hurricane Rana off the rope. Angle was sitting on the top rope, and when he flipped, Ray flipped, or Angle tried to counter to the ankle lock. They both kind of fell. Luckily, nobody got hurt, but Angle then popped up real quick and just put the ankle lock on him. So
yeah,
probably just because they were sweaty and whatnot. But other than that, the match was solid the whole way through. And like I said, for that that one little spot, it really wasn't. And like I said, if you were watching it in 02, you probably didn't even notice it. Go back and watch it, like, oh, there's a little bit of a slip up there, but it was a good match.
Absolutely. Great way to get the opener, and a great way to get the crowd involved. I mean, Kurt Angle had so much heat on him from the crowd there, so it was a great way to get the crowd vocal, and that was kind of, they kind of kept that up throughout the rest of the show.
I don't know if there was ever more polarizing figure for crowd response than Kurt Angle was.
Yeah.
And even when he came back for his last run before he was retired by Baron Corbin. Anyways, it should have been John Cena. And that's what Kurt wanted, actually, ironically enough. He wanted that, and Vince pretty much told him, well, that can be next year. And Kurt was like, well, I'm not doing next year. So apparently that's how it went. But, yeah, no, even when he came back, he still had, he embraced the "you suck" chance when he came back. And the crowd was still hot when he came out then. Even when he's general manager, he's doing this whole "you suck" thing. And like I said, I think looking back on it, you realize just how the crowd was hot for him, one way or the other. I mean, and it was, like you said, it was in New York, it was a hot crowd anyways. But, one of the most interactive crowd wrestlers, I think, just from that standpoint, that we've had ever, probably.
No, I agree there. Our next match, you have two absolute legends in the game. You have Ric Flair going to get a win over Chris Jericho by submission in just over 10 minutes here. I thought this was another solid match. Rick is 52, I believe, at this point in his career.
52, yeah.
52. So I thought this was a solid match. Ric Flair doing his typical Ric Flair stuff in this match. The dirtiest play in the game. He got his low blow in there, which set up the figure four, and Chris Jericho ends up submitting. Kind of ironic because in WWE, at least, he didn't really win a whole lot of matches with the figure four. So I thought it was kind of interesting that that was the finish here.
It had an old school feel to it.
Mm-hmm.
The rivalry had an old school feel to it. Obviously, with some new stuff, they showed the highlight package at the beginning. Getting kind of a hardcore aspects to it with trash can shots and attacking, and then Fozzy was playing, and Ric Flair destroyed their sound stage and all that stuff. But I think it was definitely an old school kind of rivalry type match that takes Jericho to that level of the old, Flair back in the day. Some of the rivalries he had, with Dusty and with the Four Horsemen and some of the stuff they had. It kind of, like you said, it felt like an old school kind of match to me, anyways.
Mm-hmm.
And Jericho, to his credit, like I said, he's still going now.
Yeah.
I mean, I've yet to see someone that Jericho can have a good match with. I'm sure there might be somebody out there, but I mean, even in AEW now, some of the stuff he's done with Orange Cassidy, the match that he had with Scorpio Sky, the beginning of AEW, like some of the stuff he does with some of the younger guys now is what Flair did with him then.
Mm-hmm.
So cool to see it.
Yeah, and Ric Flair's still relevant today too with that whole angle with Randy Orton.
Yeah, I mean, I think Orton just killed him. So,
yeah.
We don't know exactly how that went, but well, let's talk about that for a minute real quick before we get into it. So Orton, everybody that Orton's punted has pretty much laid there and died.
Yep, except for Shawn.
The Big Show, yeah. And then you have this past Monday, you have Shawn get kicked, and he's pretty much pulled himself up in the corner 12 seconds later.
Yep.
And there was a lot of backlash online about it. So we may as well talk about it now, just to put it out there. But yeah, it was. And when I watched it too, I was like, it's kind of rolling around a lot. And then they go back to him. He's in the corner trying to pull himself up. I'm like, what the hell? He literally no-sold the punt. Like, he's the only person I've ever seen no-sell that.
Mm-hmm.
To the point where you don't even know, like, and then they said they might have had heat, or there might have been something, or they're trying to further a storyline down the road later, and it's like, but you just no-sold the move that killed Edge, Christian, the Big Show, in recent memory, like, and then even the Big Show laid there like he got shot.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But anyways, I love Shawn Michaels, but still, it wasn't really good. Put it that way.
Yeah,
if I were Orton, I'd be pissed. I would be so pissed. That's how they did that, because it makes his move look so less legitimate.
Yeah, it does. It's like the Goldberg and Fiend thing. When Goldberg defeated the Fiend, it makes the Fiend not that unstoppable character anymore. It makes
100%
the
right.
Yeah,
100% right. That's the exact same thing.
Yeah.
No credibility to the move or the person by no selling the move, and that's what they used to do badly. And that's another thing. Back in the day, the Road Warriors were good for that. They, and again, we're talking about also kind of getting into the weeds weeds a little bit, but like, that's one of the knocks on the Road Warriors that, when they faced Demolition, they were no selling all kinds of moves and stuff. So it made the match look crappy, and it made like their moves look not even like devastating. But that pun is supposed to literally knock you out. It's supposed to be like, oh, your brains are scrambled, you're out, and literally Shawn just rolling over the corner, pulling himself out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know, but yeah, so yeah, cutting the weeds a little bit of sidebar there, but yeah, I figured that was a good time to mention it.
Absolutely, and we'll more about Shawn coming up a little bit later on.
This is the Shawn Michaels show today, apparently.
Yes. Next up, you have a battle of two Hall of Famers. You have Edge going to get a win over Eddie Guerrero in about just under 12 minutes. I mean, I think this is another match that had the star power maybe to open up the show. Eddie was coming into his own in 2002. He wasn't the main event level that he would reach. I think it was in 2005 when he won the title. But again, a solid match. I mean, how can you go wrong with these guys?
They both were coming into the, just getting ready to come into their own. I mean, Edge, again, he didn't, he retired for the first time in 2010, 2011, somewhere in there. So, he was still a little ways from being a rated R superstar, but he still had already branched away from Christian, as we'll talk about later on the show. Christian's on the show later.
Yep.
But, yeah, it was a great singles match. And again, another match where it really didn't slow down. The tempo was good. And it wasn't, I think that's one thing I will say about this whole show. All the matches they had in the show, the length was good for every one of them.
Yeah.
There was no like, ooh, that was too long, that was too short. The lengths were good, and like I said, it was a well produced show by the talent and the people behind the scenes.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Next up, you have a tag team match for the tag team titles. You have the Un-Americans, which was Christian and Lance Storm. They're the champions here. They're going to retain over Booker T and Goldust in about 9.5 minutes. The Un-Americans gimmick, probably something you couldn't get away with today, with everything that's going on politically and everything in the world. We won't get into that, but you probably couldn't get away with it. But you got to remember, though, this is a gimmick that is taking place just a couple months after 9/11. So it was kind of controversial back then. They're waving they come out with the American flag upside down. But Christian and Lance Storm, really good workers here. And Booker T and Goldust actually made a pretty entertaining and successful tag team. This was the only kind of match on the show that sort of felt fillerish to me. If it wasn't, it wasn't one of the marquee matches on the show, but it's still a good match. Plenty of time here, still entertaining. But this would be the one, if there was a Let Me Up match, this would probably be the one that you would have to classify it.
Yeah, and if it hadn't been from the titles, it would have been probably one of those real pointless type of matches.
Yeah.
But since the titles were in there, and the storyline of the Un-Americans, like you said, it was less than a year removed from 9/11. Mm-hmm. And I actually kind of forgot about this group. They didn't really have a super long run, but I had actually kind of somewhat forgot about the Un-Americans until we went back and saw that. But yeah, I mean, who out of those guys, Booker T had a wrestling school, Lance Storm had a wrestling school. Goldust still going today. Dustin Rhodes, at probably his best. He's probably this incarnation of Dustin in AEW is probably his best effort at like 52 or whatever.
Yeah.
Talk about Flair being 52 at the show, but Dustin's around that age now, and he is cooking with gas every time he's in the ring. He looks really good. So I mean, there's nobody. Christian's career kind of got cut short because of concussions and stuff.
Yep.
But I think if he was, he'd still be relevant even more. So if he didn't have that happen, I feel like all these guys should be in the Hall of Fame. I know some of them are, or some of them will be. But you wonder about Dustin Rhodes. He probably won't be until AEW, until he's not associated with AEW anymore, which he may never be. It's one of those things you may never actually see him in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
And Christian, I don't know what they're waiting for to put him in.
And
I don't know if they thought maybe he was going to have another match down the road, or you see Daniel Bryan come back and have this miraculous return to the ring. I don't know if maybe that's what they were thinking, but to me, and Lance Storm being talent-wise, he may not have been one of the better talkers, but wrestling-wise, he had a lot to give to the business. And I think all these guys should be at some point or another recognized for it in the Hall of Fame, in my opinion.
Nope, absolutely no argument for me there. Next up is an Intercontinental title match. You have Rob Van Dam getting a win over Chris Benoit, who's the current champion. So Rob Van Dam will become the new champion. This match, plenty of time here, 16 and a half minutes. It's a solid match here. I mean, we've talked about Chris Benoit before. You know, it's a little awkward watching his matches now, considering everything that happened. But if you can try to put that aside and just kind of look at it from a wrestling perspective, this was a really solid, entertaining match. A lot of action in here. So, you know, I thought it was a really good match. But, you know, obviously, I know we understand if it's hard for you to watch Benoit matches now.
Yeah, it's one of those things where you really have to separate the wrestler from the person.
Mm-hmm.
And we talk about this, and I brought this up. I may have a little bit of an unpopular, you know, way that I do it, but obviously he's a murderer. We get that, but he also is a great performer. So you kind of have to separate the two. And like Tim said, if you can't and you have trouble doing that, I get it. But for me, I don't. Like, I get that he did these horrible things, but that was the person that had, you know, certain things happen, head trauma, all this stuff that, you know, drove him to do this, that made him a little bit off. But as a performer, solely as a performer, he was one of the best wrestlers in that era. No matter what he did with his family, and again, it's a horrible thing, and you know, I hate to even, you know, whenever he's on the show, we kind of have to bring it up for a minute just because we get it.
Yeah.
Wrestling, pure wrestler, one of the best in the business at that time. So it's hard. It's hard to watch any of these old shows because if he's on it, you know, do we skip the match? You know, do we? I mean, we kind of have to, you know, watch it and talk about it. And like Tim said, I totally agree too. If it's something that you don't want to watch, you can't stomach to watch, then we invite you not to. But it's one of those things where it was a great match, which is unfortunate. You know, knowing that. So I mean, some of the matches he had in his career were so good. So if people have trouble watching that, you're missing out from that aspect. And again, I get if you have trouble because you know what he did with his family and all that stuff. But yeah, great match. This was a between brand match too. Mm-hmm. This was the Raw and SmackDown. You know, Benoit had it from SmackDown, and RVD won it, brought it back to Raw. So there was a little bit of interaction between Bischoff and Stephanie McMahon during this match, too, off and on backstage. So yeah, it was an interesting. That was kind of the only inter-brand match at the show.
Yeah, I want to mention this too because of the inter-brand stuff. I like this era where there was only one set of championships. They had the split. The shows, but they only had one set of championships. They didn't have, you know, the U.S. title and the Intercontinental title. They didn't have two world titles. I never liked that. I still don't like it now. I think there should be one champion. And, you know, one champion, one mid-card champion, one tag team champion. I don't like the split titles. I mean, I get why they're doing it, but to me it just kind of lessens the title's importance if there's two champions.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it becomes a dance of trying to keep champions on certain shows or having them not. Well, it's funny, too, because you have Sasha Banks and Bayley now that are on every show every day.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's not like they couldn't figure out a way to do it if you were a champion. But, I mean, we're getting to that point, though, because with what happens in the main event is what leads to Stephanie getting the champion to stay on her show. Mm-hmm. So this is almost the point where they bring back the world title.
Yeah.
So we're almost there. You know, in 2002. So, without spoiling what happens at the end, but that's what it pretty much leads to is that the world champion is supposed to be on both shows, and you know, down the road, Stephanie says, "Nope, I pay him more. He works for me," and that's when Bischoff brought the world title back.
Yeah, handed it to Triple H.
So, yep.
Next up, we have The Undertaker going to get a win over Test in just over 8 minutes in a singles match here. Undertaker is doing his American Badass gimmick back in 2002, and Test is part of the Un-Americans as well. So it's kind of, you know, America, you know, against anti-American here for the storyline. There's some, you know, Test hits the big boot, you know, almost gets the win over the Undertaker, but the Undertaker comes back, hits the tombstone for the 1-2-3. I thought it was a solid match. I mean, Test, I'm not a big Test fan, but I think he held his own here.
Yeah, pick on a dead guy. No, yeah, I think it would have been interesting to see if he had been around a little bit longer. You know, he passed away way too soon. Mm-hmm. To see if he'd still be in the business now.
Yeah.
I think for a bigger guy, he was pretty athletic. But yeah, he just never really got any traction. You know, he married Stephanie, allegedly. And then after that, it was all downhill from there.
Yeah.
So, he went to ECW, the reincarnation of ECW for a little bit, and then he was gone from the company, and shortly thereafter he passed away, which is unfortunate. But a little bit of a schmoz finish at the end too, with both the other Un-Americans coming out and Storm and Christian trying to get involved. But the Undertaker wins clean, beats 3 guys essentially. Like they said, it was pretty much a 3-on-1 at one point, But yeah, I think. Like you said, I'm not necessarily a Test fan, but I think he might have been a little underrated for what he could do because he had a good look and he could actually, for a bigger guy, actually had a lot of athleticism. So, but I mean, you're not going to beat the Undertaker unless there's, more schmozz type finish stuff that you don't see, the referee can't see. But he overcame it, won the match, and yeah, that full blown American badass. Motorcycle around the ring, all that stuff. He ended up going in the crowd to get a flag afterwards from a fan. So yeah, it was a cool moment. Again, typical America versus Canada, essentially.
Yep. Next up, we have an unsanctioned street fight between Shawn Michaels and Triple H. I know Roland's ready to get into this one. Shawn Michaels, this is his first match back after a 4-year absence with a broken back. He retired in 1998. So this is his first match back, and he put on an impressive performance here.
He he's said in multiple DVDs that he figured if he was going to come back, the only person he would trust enough to have a match with was Triple H.
Mm-hmm.
So their chemistry is inevitable, no matter good, bad, indifferent, together, away from each other, against each other. They just have great chemistry. Like I said, they know where they're going to be, whether they're on the same side or if they're facing each other. And Shawn, for what it was worth, really, I mean, he wrestled a couple of matches here and there for his promotion, during this time, but they say he was off for four years. He had a wrestling school, and he had a couple different events he actually did wrestle for his promotion, but they weren't televised, they weren't pay-per-views, so he still was in decent ring shape, which helped a lot, because if he was just some guy that was sitting there for 4 years still working out but not wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, look at what they showed with Edge when they had the ring sent down for him to return. If they didn't have that ring, he would have been, like you said, there's a difference between ring shape and good shape.
Yeah.
But yeah, they put on a hell of a match. They told a great story, and they kept it going at the end by the attack for Triple H at the end.
Yes. Yep.
And they didn't have, in typical Triple H fashion, he couldn't lose clean to the super kick either.
Nope.
He had to essentially. So at the end, you have the missed super kick, the blocked super kick. He goes for a pedigree. He grabs the legs and rolls them up. Kind of flips over and holds his shoulders down. In the replay, it's obvious that both his shoulders weren't down for most times, but the Triple H is flailing like this.
Yeah.
Times, but it's a win for Shawn, and like I said, I remember this match. I mean, I was a sophomore in high school, so I remember this match at the time it happened. I've probably seen it 10 or 15 times now. Like it's not something I haven't watched or rewatched because it's been on all of his DVDs and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So, and this is what restarted his career for almost another 10 years.
Yeah.
So he, it was supposed to be a one-off, and it turned into like a 9 or 10 year run.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, it was an incredible match. A lot of bloodshed being with Triple H as well. Triple H attacks, as you mentioned, Shawn after the match with a couple of sledgehammers and kind of laughs about it as he's walking up the ramp. So I thought they, like you said, told an incredible story. I mean, they had plenty of time here, about 28 minutes, but it didn't feel like that. Like a lot of times when you have a 28-minute match, it just kind of drags on. I didn't get that sensation at all with this one.
No, and like I said earlier, it was one of those matches where they did have starts and stops, but to tell the story, it kind of had to.
Mm-hmm.
And you're not going to have Shawn Michaels go 28 minutes nonstop after not wrestling for 4 years.
Yeah.
So, told a great story. If there had been the match at the end, this would have been the main event. If then the world title, the Undisputed Championship hadn't been on the show or whatever, this would have been the main event, hands down.
Oh, absolutely.
So.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, if anybody doesn't know the story, essentially Triple H turned on him and attacked him in the parking lot, put his face through a window to prove how vulnerable he was. And then that's what set up the story of Shawn Michaels finding out through security footage that it was him. And then that's how they, he said that doctor said he'd be ready by, say, SummerSlam. I don't know if I have a match in me, but I still can fight. And that's where they went.
Absolutely, yeah, no, incredible. Definitely go back and watch this match. I mean, it's a half hour. That's going to be well worth your time to go back and watch this. The storytelling in this one.
Exactly.
So our main event is a singles match for the Undisputed Championship. You have Brock Lesnar with Paul Heyman gonna get the win over The Rock, who's coming in as a champion in about 16 minutes here. Lots of interference by Heyman throughout the match. He's choking The Rock, he's tripping The Rock, kicking The Rock. Eventually, The Rock puts Heyman through a table. But Brock Lesnar shows his dominant self and hits the F5 for the 1-2-3, and he becomes the youngest champion ever. This is kind of the rise of Brock Lesnar, with this match kind of putting him on the map here.
And you think about it, too. Like, go back and think about it. That was 2002, and then by WrestleMania the next year, or the following year, it was 2004, right? It was WrestleMania 2004 when he walked away, when it was him and Goldberg.
That was WrestleMania 2020, so...
I don't want to misquote it, but anyways,
yeah.
Think about, I mean, it was maybe a year and a half run.
Yeah.
And then he's gone.
Mm-hmm.
But it was also probably the fastest rise of any, like you said, the youngest world champion ever, the youngest WWE champion, and it definitely, he was green, very green still. He was way more athletic than he is now. It wasn't just suplex, F5. There was, a lot more wrestling in this match than any of the newer, the most recent Brock Lesnar matches. So that was refreshing too, because you can only see so many Brock Lesnar matches of him suplexing pretty much everybody for 10 minutes and then calling it a day.
Yeah.
That gets old quick. So thankfully, but yeah, there were some spots in here that, The Rock was trying to clothesline him and Brock's telling him to hit him again. And it was definitely passing of the torch too, from The Rock kind of leaving to go to Hollywood shortly thereafter.
Mm-hmm.
And it was one of those things, The Rock comes back here and there, which he came back a couple years ago. Still, so it's one of those things. They had to pass the torch. It might have been a little premature, but why wouldn't you strap the championship, the belt to the Rocket? He was the next big thing, to quote Paul Heyman. And funny story about that is that Paul Heyman was supposed to be Chris Benoit. He was supposed to be with Chris Benoit.
Mm-hmm.
And they ended up going with Lesnar because Brock, when he was doing dark matches, it ended up being produced by Paul Heyman. And they were leading towards that WrestleMania, the year, this 2002. And it was, Vince pretty much didn't say anything about the Benoit thing. So then after the meeting, Paul asked him, he goes, I wasn't going to speak up during the meeting, so I waited till afterwards. I was like, hey, what happened to the Benoit thing? You never said anything. He goes, no, I'm going to put you with Brock, and you start tomorrow. On Monday Night Raw the next day. He's like, oh, okay.
All right.
That's how it went. And Brock's been with Paul ever since.
Yeah.
So it worked out well for both of them, I think.
No, absolutely. Just a couple thoughts here. Like you said, it was refreshing that it wasn't a squash match. There was some actual wrestling, and went pretty decent amount of time, 16 minutes there. But this, like you said, the run with Brock was kind of short, but it was really impactful. And I think it also made his return back in 2012, I believe it was, even that much more eventful, because he was such a short, dominating run. So I think it made his return a little bit more impactful as well.
Yeah, you couldn't have scripted it any better for The Rock to go away and for them to have someone to pass the torch to.
Yeah.
That was the nice thing. And like I said, who at that time, you could have had Triple H or somebody, but he already had a storyline. So it made sense to just go with the next big thing, and then that's where they ended up. So it told a good story.
Yeah, absolutely. This whole pay-per-view was really great. I mean, if I had to recommend one match, I would, probably say the street fight between Shawn Michaels and Triple H, but the main event, and I even think the opener too, are worthwhile to watch. The Kurt Angle Rey Mysterio match. Yeah,
or even the Jericho and Ric Flair match.
Yeah,
what it was, a pretty good match. Like I said, there wasn't much on the card that I would say you can skip through. And just so you know, I did look it up. It was WrestleMania 20, like you had said. And that was in 2004.
2004. So
you're looking at less than 2 years after Lesnar wins the title. He's gone.
He's gone.
So it was a very short run for Brock. he came in the Monday night after WrestleMania in 2002, and then was gone WrestleMania 2004.
Mm-hmm.
And he wins the title at SummerSlam, which is, 4 months away, from coming into the business. From coming into WWE, he was in their developmental OVW. But yeah, it's one of those things. You can't understate how short that run is when you go back and look at it. Lesnar makes his return. His return has been way longer than his initial run.
Oh, absolutely.
So, and I would too if they were throwing that kind of money at me.
Yeah, he's got a sweet deal.
And reportedly, you brought up Goldberg earlier with the Fiend. Reportedly, he still has 2 more matches on his contract.
Goldberg?
Yeah. So yeah, we can see some ugly stuff coming up. Depending on who they put him with. Supposedly, he's got 2 more. According to him, he's got 2 more matches on his contract. So, maybe they can put Goldberg and Edge together.
Maybe.
When Edge comes back, burn one of his matches. I don't know.
It'd be interesting to see what they do with Goldberg. So that's our rundown of SummerSlam 2002. I'm going to give this one a pretty high rating, probably about in the 8 range, 8 to an 8.5. I think it was one of the better WWE shows that we've covered since doing this podcast, I think.
Yeah, I think the same thing. I give it an 8. The 2 matches we talked about, both on American matches, really were the ones that were kind of just there. I mean, the Undertaker match told the story too with the titles. The tag title match was another one of those. Yeah, just like you said. But other than that, I mean, they weren't bad matches, and they weren't. Like I said, there was nothing really bad on the show.
So coming up for you next week, we're going to continue with the SummerSlam trend. We're going to go back in time to 1988 and cover the first ever SummerSlam. Looking forward to covering that. That should be interesting to see how the business was back then, and looking forward to dissecting that one.
On the anniversary, too. It was August 29th.
Yeah.
So that'll be on the anniversary. On top in that pay-per-view was the Mega Powers against the Mega Bucks. So you had Hogan and Savage against DiBiase and Andre the Giant. So that's what's on top for that show.
Yeah, looking forward to going back. It's always fun to go back and watch the old school wrestling shows. So that'd be interesting to go back and watch that one. So looking forward to that. That's coming up for you next week, SummerSlam 1988.
Which again was the first ever SummerSlam.
First ever SummerSlam, yeah. So that's 32 years later. Here we are.
We may as well end the month of August with the first one.
Yes, absolutely.
Timing of it's perfect, and it's SummerSlam. You think August means SummerSlam? Well, here's the first one.
Yes. So that's coming up for you next week. We will be back next Saturday at 5. Until then, everybody stay safe. Thanks for tuning in. And I'm Tim Kirk.
I'm Roland Hewlett.
And this is Wrestling with Wrestling's Past and Present.